Yeah, part of my profession is actually story writing. So I'm gonna tell you a little story, and it starts with me being a student here, and I actually, what we could do was going to the different universities, to the TU and the HTW, and I discovered that one of these universities, I can't really tell you which one, is working on this really super cool technology. And it's basically, I can project pictures into your brains. And we made a little installation of a program into your brains. I hope that's okay for all of you. We can delete it. We can't delete it afterwards, but we can kind of pause it for a while. And I can't tell you too much about it because we're right now in debates with really cool high-tech companies who want to use the technology for marketing purposes. But so we run this little avant-garde test here right now today at the Science and Art Symposium. So the first thing I'm going to project in your brain is a slide of a chessboard, like just a normal black and white. Oh no, wait, the first slide I'm going to project is actually the title of my lecture. It's called Spaces of Control and Play. And then right underneath you read my name and my affiliation, my email address, and a link to my social network, so you can contact me after the lecture, of course. So that's the first thing. And then we can start projecting cool images. First one is the chessboard. And in the chessboard you see an image of a book, which is also having a chessboard on the cover, and it's called Die Schachnovelle. And it was written by Stefan Zweig during the Second World War in his Brazilian exile. He had to leave Austria to escape the Nazis. And in it he describes the story of a prisoner of the Gestapo, the German secret Nazi police. And these agents capture the protagonist and try to break him mentally by means of total isolation. So they slowly drive him mad, and he realizes if he goes mad he will give up all his secrets eventually, so he tries to find a way to escape it. And he really has no distraction. He knows his brain needs distraction in the isolated room. So one day during one of the tortures, he's actually managing to steal a book from one of his torturers, from the topic, and he's really happy. He doesn't know which book it is, and he brings it back into his cell. And he thinks maybe it's a really interesting story which will keep me occupied. And what he actually stole is just a book about the 50 most important chess games in history. So he's really, what the fuck, what should I do with it? But he kind of starts to read it and starts to build little chess figures out of bread, and uses the blanket, which by chance has black and white squares, as a chessboard. And after a month of isolation and repeating all the chess games over and over, he finally starts playing against himself over and over again in his head. Like, he became so good in chess that he just uses his own head to imagine the chess games. And he ends up in a state of chess poisoning. So he basically goes mad, but he manages to not give up any secrets, because he developed this kind of secondary visual system which lets him escape and not deal with reality anymore. And years later he finds himself again on a cruise ship, and he meets the current world champion in chess, who's kind of this bulky Russian guy, not very intellectual. And he starts to play with him again. He watched and he knows he shouldn't go back, but he starts to play one game against him and almost wins. But during this kind of chess game he starts to go on his old madness from his cell and starts to play again, and it's kind of overlaying the real chess game with the virtual game he's playing against himself, and he has to stop. And that's also how the story ends, and he's like, he never wants to go back playing chess again. So now the chess game in your head is also becomes a bit more blurry, and the black and white cubes start to move a little bit, and they kind of create this visual overlay as well. And it's kind of the background for me to talk about chess as one of the oldest and most universal games played by humans. First, it was invented as kind of a simulation of real war. The board was, of course, a map, mapping out these different territories. and the individual figures represented different elements of the army: infantry, cavalry, archer, commander, and so on. And later chess became a great pastime and sport, of course. It's still played internationally, and it's a signification of culture and intelligence. And last but not least, it became a training program for computers on how to be human players. And some even consider the defeat of Garry Kasparov in 1997 by the computer program Deep Blue as a landmark event of entering a contemporary science fiction world in which our own technical creations overturn the most capable human players. Like Kurzweil talks about it, and he sees it like as this event where eventually we will end up with computers which are more intelligent than all human brains combined. And he says this is the event where we can actually prove that it's possible. Okay, but now we stop with the chessboard, and instead we see a cute pile of children toys, and they signify how human culture and interaction has always revolved around activities of play. Because before we learn how to speak, we will always express ourselves through the use of hands and objects. And nowadays, just like all other things, the toys we used to play with become increasingly more virtual. And it is only a matter of time until the computer game industry not only creates the biggest entertainment sector in history, but it also changes the social and political landscape we live in. And now you see an image of a room with many monitors and computers, kind of a LAN party, and each one is occupied by a young Asian man. And what we actually see is a factory for virtual goods, where, for example, in the famous computer game World of Warcraft, Chinese players gather virtual gold and items by playing up to 16 hours a day in order to sell them for real money to Western consumers who pay an estimate of at least $1 billion every year for this service. So this is already happening 4 years ago. Since then you don't really get any data about it, but it's growing. And another image you can see is a browser game where a white goat stands on a green field. And in the background you see beautiful mountains with icy tops and the Swiss flag. And from the sides there are black sheep approaching from a less green field. And it's actually a computer game, Zockel rettet die Schweiz, which was commissioned by the biggest Swiss party in order to emphasize the danger of illegal immigration to young Swiss computer players. And we can go on showing a lot of these images emphasizing the impact of computer games. But instead, I would like to emphasize how social interaction in general are subject to change, and the basic human need for direct communication and affection remains. And in order to imagine this, you now see an image of any museum of contemporary art today, which was recently built. And it's looking from the outside like a set of a sci-fi film or a stranded spaceship. And inside, it provides us with spaces designed to actually free us of our physical all-daily perception, created to lead to us into another unreal experience, and to free our mind while communicating with the artwork, which might not even exist at all anymore in the reality of physical space. So people still today go to the museum to actually watch toilets or white paintings because they look for this kind of immersive virtual experience they have in front of a physical object. It's not enough to look at catalogs, it's not enough to talk about these stories, but you actually want to be there and you want to have this relationship in physical space. And due to the artificial setup of most contemporary exhibitions, I consider the relationship of the audience towards a piece of art as a virtual experience, as the work is supposed to evoke intellectual thoughts and emotions within a space which is considered to exist outside of society. The white cube is therefore close to a 3D grid or holodeck in which visual information is only implemented in order to lead to another unreal experience. And this approach towards the creation of meaning is not purely rational, but physical immersive within the actual haptic or virtual space, and therefore offers a plausible alternative and enhancement towards text and idea-based signification. And now we slowly enter this holodeck, which is a vision from the future, and at the same time, all its walls remotely resemble the chessboard we have seen before. And next you can imagine creative applications that have become so limitless, and artificial intelligence being such a perfect copy of the human mind that anybody can create the manifestation of his or her dreams on a purely symbolic level. And this holodeck is of course controlled by language. You go in, you say what you want, which is the field of the symbolic, the hedonistic, the pleasure principle. And in it we can fulfill our most intimate and fantastic wishes, but only the ones which we know of. And this is the main problem we have with imagination today. Because next we imagine the perfect world, for example, a lecture where everything the speaker says is illustrated with funny pictures from the internet, and we listen, we laugh, and then we leave, and we forget what just has been said. And images somebody, and then this image blurs into somebody lying on the couch during psychoanalysis, and the patient speaks about dreams, family, and perversions. And in this interactive process, themes appear the speaker did not anticipate. And suddenly he or she can express fantasies unknown to him or herself. But the problem with this technology is, of course, that freeing the individual was invented 100 years ago. And these models are now not accurate enough anymore because psychologically we got so used to them. And everybody knows how to lie and behave during a job interview because we are so familiar with these mechanics of psychology we are so used to. So we now need more accurate instruments to tell us what we really want and who we really are. And now we can imagine contemporary gaming applications which slowly overcome simple psychological models. And if you fill out a test at an online dating platform, you might still be asked about your preferences concerning the visual aspects of a partner, but you will also need to answer a lot of more abstract questions. And soon you might even need to navigate through a virtual labyrinth, or you write a small text on the topic you choose, and you will be measured by your optical, spatial, and linguistic behavior, unknown to yourself, and therefore an accurate measurement of your wishes. And now you can also imagine cutting-edge recruitment offices in the modern world, where the Department of Human Resources is still run by people, but they actually do not interview anymore, and they don't look at what university you studied in or your work experience when you apply. Instead, they look at the score of the little game you have played when applying. And it tells them much better how social you are, what your specific skills are, and how long you will stay at the company, and how you might perform in the next 10 years. And similar applications are already or will be run in the field, in any field where huge amounts of data has to be accessed and where people's behavior has to be evaluated because the human brain is too complex to be measured by prefabricated algorithms. Instead, evolving and motivating games have to be played all the time and constantly be developed in the process of playing along the participants in order to create accurate and useful information. Just like we heard, big data or the internet itself is not a very good technology to predict the future. Instead, it's the constant input and interactivity of the user which makes them so powerful tools in our society today. And still, all these games are only virtual, and they always describe a world without consequence and risk, and therefore ultimately lacking any challenge and the thrill of reality. A computer might beat us at chess, but so far poker is too complex, especially because of the irrationality and social action that's happening between the players. And there's no computer program until today which can beat the best human players in poker, even though it seems such an easy game. And so there still might be space for our brains to be useful as long as we get rid of the black and white grid, which is suggested by the overlaying algorithmic systems. And now images of small art spaces come up where the social experiments performance artists have carried out take place. It might be 100 years ago, when Dadaists played at Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich during the First World War, mocking every authority while the world around them collapsed. And it might be 50 years ago when Fluxus and video performances created extensive physical playgrounds and galleries, which nevertheless were always referring to hidden virtual themes in society. And now you can imagine the surrealist Henri Breton, and you can think about what he actually meant when he said that the greatest surrealistic work would be to shoot with a gun into a crowd of innocent people. And of course he is a big artist today and not a madman because he never did it, but now we can actually imagine this provocation because we can reenact it every day in 3D shooters which are on the market. And this conflict between virtual and real effects can be also seen in debates in Germany and Switzerland especially, where games are regularly blamed for inspiring public massacres. Or the questions whether human avatars in games should have human rights, or satire and freedom of choice justifies these simulations and transgressions. And my question therefore is if the proposal of the historical avant-garde and computer games are nowadays actually closer to the possibilities than the often restricted and authoritarian conventions of other entertainment titles and natural sciences, and how to re-implement this discursive potential into what it can offer to an audience, which is educated enough to make its own choices, opposed to a puppet master scenario in which the perfect virtual reproduction offers mass-produced desires. And in this scenario, both a manifestation of a subjective position and art as a confrontation of pure sense is offered, which is neither a simple image nor merely entertainment. And for the last image, I ask you to imagine a real city shaped in the grid system again, and you can walk through all of the streets, but sooner or later you will get exhausted physically, and you cannot enter most of the spaces, and the doors are locked, areas are restricted. The skyline might just be an illusion. We could not tell the difference. And in some of the new computer games, it is possible to enter any house, speak with or kill any character, pick up every object, and experience the world without any limits. And thus, virtual reality is a limited reality, but soon we might realize that it's less limited than the world we used to live in. And it is exactly this physical experience of boundless possibility which is transgressive and utopian at the very same time. And that's it.